Fuel, I am on. I think I'm good to go. Let's see. Give it a moment. Alrighty. So, um, I really should have done this as like an edited video, but as you can tell, I haven't really had a bunch of time to do that. This is my last week on my primary show, and then for the next 2 weeks, I'm basically sitting in reserve in case my two secondary shows need me to sub in for any reason backstage. So it may happen, it may not happen. I basically have a 2 week window of just being, on the bench waiting to see if I am needed. Um, so that's where we are right now with work. And so at the end of this week, I'll have less obligation. So some of the stuff that's been sitting in my archive to edit, hopefully I'll be able to start to really notch out some of those into actually edited videos. Um, and I also want to start my podcast. I've been contemplating starting a podcast for a while. I already have a name for it. I've been doing a little bit of research, but so that's two things I want to start in the 2 weeks between the end of my obligation to my primary show. Like I said, I still have 2 weeks where I'm basically sitting on the reserve bench in case they need me. And then I'm back in the box truck full time. So before I get back in the box truck full time, there was a major issue, namely my primary battery for a long time has been that Jackery 1500. And recently I first discovered it while it was solar charging. While it was solar charging, it wasn't charging. The light would come on for a second, and then it would go out. And then the light would come on for another second, and then it would go out. I didn't notice this until it came back from the mechanic shop, and it wasn't even hooked up to anything while it was at the mechanic. The solar was just disconnected because it was just sitting in the shop for like 2 weeks. And then when I got it back, I was trying to start to get things set up in there so I could be ready to move in. I knew end of October I needed to be planning for. And so I noticed the percentage wasn't going up. And like I said, the blue light to charge came on and then it went off. Came on and then it went off. And no matter how long I left it, there was no increase in the percentage of charge. So I was like, let me grab the power brick and take it inside because right now I have my employee housing and attempt to charge it by the power brick. Well, I plugged the power brick into the wall and I was getting the exact same results that I was getting from solar. So I know it wasn't because at first I thought maybe my solar panels needed to be replaced. Thank goodness I didn't go down that route without further testing because it's definitely the unit and not the charging source. Because it doesn't matter if it's the plug or solar or the DC connector for the cigarette port, they're all doing the exact same thing. As some of you may know, because I posted about it on the community page, I reached out to Jackery, and initially they were like, well, try this. If this doesn't work, get back to us. So I did that. They were like, try this. If this doesn't work, let us know. And then somebody in chat and then they were like, give us this information. And I replied with that information, including the serial number of the unit. And then the next person that answered obviously hadn't read the thread because they were asking me to do stuff that I had already done. So at that point, I was already getting kind of frustrated because I just wanted to know if it could be fixed. It was clear to me what the problem was, and I even said, "Hey, if I need to pay to have this fixed, I'm okay with that. Just give me a number. Let me evaluate if it's worth it to get this fixed, as opposed to throwing out because this is it has a battery in it has electronics in it, and if it's just one little thing that's broken, honestly, I'd rather fix it than put this in a landfill. And so I said, hey, if there's a price to fix this, let me know. Let me know what I have to do. And honestly, even though they haven't said it directly, they've literally never answered the question. I don't think that's a thing Jackery does. Now, if you buy it and it is still under warranty, they will replace it, which usually means they will send you a new unit. You put the old unit in the box, you send the old unit back to them, and therefore it is replaced with a new unit. The timeline in which this can take is giant question marks, but that is something they will do as long as you can prove, one, that it's under warranty, and two, that it's the device issue and not like you threw it in the ocean. Because literally, one of the things they sent me was, oh, if you immersed it in water, then have you done that? Because that would make it stop working. And I'm like, why would I immerse it in water? Like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, so under those two conditions, they replace, they do not repair. And I know that's one of the things that's been said about power stations. Oh, if something breaks on it, you're gonna have to ship it back for repair and wait for it to come back to you. This is a lie. And it's not just a Jackery thing, it's a power station thing for the most part. Unless somebody knows about one that's different, it's pretty much the same process across the board of you, one, trying to prove that it's a power station and not you as a user, and two, that it's under some warranty where they will have to replace it. Therefore, even if you are willing to, there does not seem to be an option for I am willing to pay for a small repair. Which, as I evolve in my, thinking about my personal, and sorry I'm not in the chat because I just kind of wanted to get all this out. As I evolve in my sort of plans for power and thinking about my home, like while I was in this process, I just realized one thing. I could not wait on Jackery when I had this much of a timeline until I had to be back into my home, which is the box truck. So I needed to act, even if I wasn't under the best financial circumstances to act. And honestly, from the time I built the box truck, my plan, my personal goal was to eventually build my own battery. And I was really ambitious in that I wanted to build it from cells and I wanted to read up and make sure I knew what I was doing. Now, I have had an AGM battery in the past, in fact, twice. When I was in the minivan, it was the first time I ever built my own solar system. I got a kit. I bought a couple of batteries. I bought a small inverter and I installed it in my minivan. And it was very scary the first time I did it. And I upgraded that system a little bit over time, up until the time I let go of the minivan. When the minivan went to its new owner, the solar system in that minivan went with its new owner. When I had the Chevy van, when I got it, it already had a solar system in it, and it had one large 200 amp hour AGM battery. So that another AGM battery system. It was so heavy. It was about as big as this battery, but this battery, even though it is not light, is comparatively lighter than the battery that was in the Chevy van. I did start to review Jackery around the time that I had the Chevy van. And so I had the Jackery system as a backup, but my primary system was the one that was hooked up to the AGM battery, and the Jackery was just extra. And that was not this Jackery here. I had a Jackery 1000 for a very long time. It honestly never gave me any major problems, had no issues with it. When they offered me the chance to review the 1500, of course I said yes. I got the unit for review, and I basically met somebody who could use the 1000, and I didn't see why I needed the 1000 and the 1500. And so I decided at that point to give away the 1000. Now, I did also get a chance to get a Jackery 300, which I do love and adore, and my Jackery 300 is working fine. Yeah, and it's been under the exact same conditions of the Jackery 1500, and the 300 is the one that's still working. I still like it because it's something you could easily pull out, put on a tabletop. If I'm outside and my camera's going dead, I can hook it up to, a small unit like the Jackery 300. So I still love my Jackery 300. I have no universal hate for the idea of a power station. I'm just moving away from the idea of ever wanting it as my primary power source again. especially because of this lack of repair option. If they do actually replace the Jackery 1500, which it seems like they might do, obviously I'm going to go ahead and take it because it's always nice to have backup power around. But my original offer was, hey, if there's a price for repair, I'm willing to pay it. They seem to be not answering that question because I don't think that option exists. And so while I was in the middle of that, and I did not know what Jackery was going to do, I decided I personally needed power. And so I bought this battery, which has been on my, I have notes here because I want to make sure I talk about all this. So again, I'm sorry for ignoring the chat because I just want to get through this. But I bought this battery. I've been looking at it for a while. I know a lot of people like to get a battery, especially if they're going with some sort of off-brand battery. They like to get batteries that will pros reviews, which I think is a very good thing because people bust open the batteries, pull them apart, talk about what's good and bad about them. But what I noticed basically is a trend that most of them seem decent at this point. You know, they don't seem to be terrible. And one of the big things that Will Prowse would usually find was not a capacity issue, but the fact that sometimes they lied about the temp sensors in them. So I felt like lithium batteries not only have had price drops in the last few years, like, so they're not that much more expensive than AGM anymore. Like before, AGMs were deep cycle batteries, a little bit better than the lead acid batteries where you have to pour the water in, and you know, could take a bigger hit than those batteries, but were not as good as lithium batteries. And then of course there are also gel batteries, which also have their own chemistry things going on. But all of those also had the problem of you could only use 50% of them. So you bought, you know, 100 amp hours to use 50. You bought 200 amp hours to use 100 amp hours. And that was just how the battery chemistry works. I know somebody was like, why would they scam you like that? That's just how the battery chemistry works. The chemistry they use in those batteries have a harder time recovering and start degrading if you go lower than 50%. And that's because a lot of those were the original design and purpose of those batteries were to run a car. So your car needs to initially start up, or even an engine, general engines, you're not trying to run like appliances off those all day. They need to start up, go, and then they go, you know? And it doesn't require, amazingly, once that engine starts going, you know, the same demands as trying to like run appliances off the battery. But lithium is sort of changing the game, and also it's becoming prevalent enough that the prices aren't as extreme as they were a few years ago, where I honestly would have argued and did argue and break down prices in the video why a power station was kind of a deal. But I also think nothing stays true. And as things are evolving, we're seeing price drops that are making lithium batteries more accessible as a choice in a way they weren't before. That being said, this was not a cheap battery. And one of the big things I've been doing since I've been here is paying down a credit card that I've used for an emergency repair. And unfortunately, I had to reverse that to make sure I had power when I moved back into the box truck. It wasn't the ideal choice that I wanted to make, but it was also, I need power. So that's kind of what led me, that's all the decisions that led me here. One of the reasons I like this battery is specific, you'll notice a lot of stuff up here, most of it didn't come with it, is this battery comes with this, and what this is a wall charger that literally plugs into the battery. So you have this goes into the battery, this goes into the wall. And I like that this battery, it still can be hooked up like a regular battery, but it has that feature. So if you turn it to the side, and I'll put a link to this battery in the description, but I cannot recommend this battery yet because I have not used it. I want to say that very specifically. I cannot recommend this battery because I have not used it. I'm just going to talk about the reasons I personally decided to take a risk on this battery. You know, in a few months when I've been on the road with the truck, I can talk about if I recommend it or not. But there is a little port right here where you put this in, you screw that on, You can already hear this thing buzzing. And then like you plug this in and it'll charge the battery. I like that it had this because otherwise I would have had to buy a battery charger that is compatible with lithium. And I will eventually get in catch up with you guys. I just need to talk without looking at the screen. So that was one of the reasons I got this battery. This battery also has USB ports on the side. So you turn on the power. The power does not power the battery. It simply powers this USB port. So you can never turn this on if you want to and just hook things up to the battery ports. This is designed as a trolling motor battery. So as you can see, it has these raised tips, but it also, you can just hook up regular terminals to it as well because it has a way to do those. A lot of people seem to think I've never done a solar system before. I have done basic solar before, so I have most of the basics down enough to set up myself with a system. Like there was a larger learning curve when I did it in my minivan, however many years ago that was, than there is now. I'm just circling back to something I did before with a new battery chemistry that I've never had before. So yeah, before I talk any more about some other things, I'm going to jump in the chat and see what you guys have been saying. I do have a laptop over on this side, so if I'm turned to the side, it's just because I'm reading. So let me look in the chat. Whoa, okay, cool. So hello to everybody who's here. I think I see 62 people in the chat and 45 thumbs up. So thank you to everybody who's here live. Obviously, this will be reposted as what's the word? Reposted as a once the live is done, people can look at it later. But for everybody who's here live, thank you so much. You'll be able to go back and watch the beginning of this video. That was a lot of storytelling, and I know it sucks for people who are jumping on later. But once this goes up, it's just a replay. That was the word I was looking for. Once this goes up at a replay, you can go back and sort of watch it all. But repeating it in the middle of the video is just going to make it harder to follow as a replay. And it's going to be repetitive for the people who are watching the replay. Like I said, ideally this would have been a pre-recorded video, but I've been having trouble keeping up with that. So we're just going to do this. I see somebody asking where Mickey and Felix are. Mickey is, let's see if we can get him on camera. He's over there by the window, and I don't know where Felix is right now. Oh, I actually see him. He's in that chair behind Mickey's new backpack. That black thing on the floor is Mickey's new backpack. But Felix is in the chair because he's gray. You can barely see him because he's blending in. Both of them are right there. All right. So let's come back to battery business. Okay, let me put the charger down. And let's see what else is in the chat. Coralie of Jump With No Fear says, ooh, nice, a podcast will be great. Thank you. Yes, I've been thinking about this podcast for like months. So yeah, next week I really want to start. But I want to record. I have like a list of like topics I want to cover. So I want to record my first topic next week. I don't know if the podcast will be up next week or the following week. It depends on how recording and uploading for the first time goes. I kind of got to establish a workflow with that. I will do a video version of the podcast. So you'll have the choice to just, download it as something you can listen to or like listen to it, hopefully on any platform you want, but we'll see how well that works out. If not, then it might just be on SoundCloud. Which is something I'm considering. I know somebody else who does their podcast exclusively on SoundCloud and has had problems getting it on other places. But worst comes to worst, it'll just be on SoundCloud. Hopefully, I'll be able to figure out how I can get it on multiple things, but I also want to have a video version, which will just be me talking to the camera. So whatever. Hello to everybody in the chat. Thank you for the reminders to hit that thumbs up button. What is the white box called with the jumper cables? I'm about to circle back to that. The box with the white sticker is the battery. Okay. Q. All right. So right now there isn't a lot of questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and circle back to my notes here and talk about the other things that are on this battery. So obviously this is the battery. It's a 200 amp hour battery. That is not watt hours. That is 200 amp hours of battery. It's a deep cycle battery with more than 2,000 cycles. The maximum discharge can reach 200 amps. The BMS on this supports series and parallel, so you can get another battery, you put it in series, you can put it on in parallel, and double or triple your capacity. Generally, with batteries, as much as people say you can just add on batteries, generally you don't want batteries of a crazy different age. And that was another thing. I didn't want to buy like a 100 amp hour battery now and get another 100 amp hour battery later, because technically you don't want to mix the ages of batteries. The most ideal thing to do is like get them so that they're the same age. Because if there's any deterioration in one battery, it will affect the second battery if you're bringing it in later down the line. So yeah, and it alleges, I don't have the capacity to test it, but it alleges that the BMS has temperature protection. That being said, I will still be doing my due diligence and keeping an eye on this and not assume that's true, because when Will Prouse tests a lot of these lithium batteries, one of the things that fails the most is the temperature protection. And let's be honest, a lot of these are just repackaged China batteries, and about 30,000 of them are the exact same battery with a different label on it. I don't expressly have a problem with that as long as it works. Even the batteries in the Jackery, like Jackery and Blue Eddy and all of them are going to talk about being a US company, all the crap in that battery came from China. So there's literally no avoiding it. Like, everybody's getting their battery stuff from China. Now, there may be some manufacturing processes specific to their US, warehouses or whatever, but all the stuff is coming from China for the most part. So the fact that this is probably a repackaged version of something else doesn't expressly bother me, because most of them are at this point. So let's talk about this. This is a charge controller that I've had for a while. It's been in other videos. I've used it for showing how you can hook up. That's why I'm surprised people keep talking to me like I've never done a solar system before. I literally have used this in about 3 or 4 videos to teach things about solar. But this was never intended for me personally as a primary charge controller. It has a lithium setting. So it's a 20 amp or 30 amp. Let me see. I forget. It's a 30 amp. So it's a 30 amp charge controller. I couldn't remember if it was 20 or 30. Either way, it'll work for now. I did not have the money to buy the charge controller I wanted. And this is where the price of the battery is something you have to think about as not the end of the equation. When you're starting, I'm going to turn this a little better. When you're starting to build your own solar system, the end of your purchase is not the battery. Charge controllers can get very expensive. And ideally, I actually did want a charge controller with a temperature sensor. There's about 3 that I like, but I can't afford any of them right now. And I already have this, and it is compatible. It is compatible with lithium batteries. It's a 30 amp charge controller. I do have a temperature sensor that I can put in the battery area to just visually monitor it. And 80% of the time, I won't have to. People act like you're in extreme conditions like all the time. I had a very specific incident of a very hot summer this year, which I didn't have any problems during like the hottest part of the summer. But anyway, that I know about. But under normal circumstances, I am in a lot of like mid conditions. I had a couple of days I was in really cold conditions that I was driving through and out of. So it's not like I'm worried about being in a blizzard and days upon days upon days of there being extreme cold. However, I would prefer a charge controller that actually has a temperature sensor on it as well, even if the BMS has temperature protection, because I have no way to honestly verify it the way Will Prouse can. So that would be my preferred. But due to money, this is what I'm using right now. I don't really mind this charge controller. It's really cute. You open it up and the screwdriver falls out. And basically it's like any other one. This is where you would hook up to the battery. This is where you would hook up to solar, and this is your load. And what I like about this one is really cool is it comes with like a little screwdriver, so you can loosen and tighten your little screws here. Yes, I know how the screwdriver works. We're just not going to stick it down in there. Then you can put your screwdriver there. So that feature's cool, but this isn't my ideal charge controller. Now, just to test the battery, because you don't have to hook this up to solar, what I did was I put clamps on it. This is not a permanent setup. I will be using I will be re-crimping this cable so that it has a standard ring connector on it. And I just hooked it up to the battery to like test it. I've been playing with it over the last couple of days. And it's coming on, so you can see the screen going. This also has USB ports on the side, which is useful. There's USB ports everywhere on everything right now. But yeah, there's your charge controller. And obviously, solar goes in one side. I probably won't use the load because I don't need to. I already have a fuse box in the box truck. Thank goodness, because that's another thing I would have to buy. But yeah, we're going to disconnect this. So the clamps were just an easy way to initially test the battery, make sure it had a charge, get some information on it. You know, I've been playing around with a couple of things for the battery. But again, talking about cost when setting up a solar system, you're going to need a charge controller, basic, you know, and so that's an additional cost over the battery. And a lot of the good ones are expensive. And when you get a lot of those solar kits, they come with really cheap PWM controllers, which should be the first thing you replace. And this is better than one of those. So I'm going to go with it for now. Now, another thing I needed, because I need to plug in things like normal things, is I needed an inverter. Ideally, I would have liked at least a 1,000-watt inverter. It is a downgrade because with Jackery, it does have a 2,000-watt inverter in it. It's a 1,500 watt-hour power station, but it has a 2,000-watt inverter in it. I initially wanted at least a 1,000-watt inverter. Again, getting one that's at least modified sine wave, not pure sine wave, gets on the expensive side. So I got a 500-watt inverter, which will get me by for most things now. This is another thing I see upgrading in the future, but for now, this is what I could afford. It does come with this plug to plug into a car, what do you call it? The car 12-volt cigarette port. I would never plug a 500-watt inverter into a cigarette port. Before I knew what I was doing, that is how I almost melted and destroyed a cigarette port. So unless you have a really small inverter, like I would say 100 watts or less, never plug it into your cigarette port because it can cause you trouble. Those ports are not meant to carry a load super high. And I like to play it on the safe side because I don't want to destroy my car. So technically out of the box, they're telling you this could hook up to just plug into your car cigarette lighter. I ultimately, just like the charge controller, will change these out for ring connectors, but I actually did use this again just to do testing. I probably should have done the negative first. What I like about this is it does have a voltage reading on the front. It has USB ports, and I have plugged things into here and been able to pull power out of the battery and then fill the battery back up with the wall charger. So this was useful for doing some minor testing. And so I will not be using this cable, but the cable that came out of the box was really useful for testing. All right, let's see. So cool. That's what that is. It's a 500-watt inverter. For now, it will run most things I need. So that's sort of where I am with power at the moment. One, Jackery may or may not fulfill their promise to me. I'm not waiting on them because I can't afford it. I need to live in my house in 2 weeks, the box truck. I need to be able to turn on my fridge in my house in 2 weeks in the box truck. I need to be able to turn on my lights. I need to be able to do all the things that power gives you. So waiting on Jackery was not an option. And so I made the decision that I made. Like I said, I don't know if Jackery is going to fulfill their promise or not. If they do, I will update you. I do know when I emailed them back, I again got that form letter, which I now know is a form letter because I got it twice, that is auto sent out, that says, for the second time, thank you for your patience. We value you as a customer. Some BS that's definitely thrown out by a computer, by the help desk, as opposed to a human being actually typing it. Because you don't get the exact same word for word message twice unless a bot is sending it out. So I just don't trust the Jackery situation, even though they said they do think it qualifies for a replacement. I am not going to trust it until that actually happens, and I still don't trust depending on the power station in the future, because I just don't like that there's no way to repair it. Like, even if you say, like, okay, fine, I'm just willing to repair it so I don't have to throw this whole thing away, like, it doesn't seem to exist in the power station world. So I have the basic things I need to sort of set myself up to build myself a power system. And I honestly have more power than I had before. This is more power than I had before. I'm trying to think. Maybe it's about as much as a Jackery 1000, actually. I need to go on the website and actually do a price comparison. But I think I'm getting more watt hours for less than what a Jackery 1000 costs. Not even the 1500, like for less than what the Jackery 1000, or around the same amount. You know, which is how much the game has changed since like 3-4 years ago. 3-4 years ago, that would not have been true with a lithium battery. Okay, I'm done being a nerd and explaining the situation. If anybody wants the whole story, this will be available on replay, but just for the sake of the replay, I don't want to circle back around, so I'm going to jump into the chat. If you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, it doesn't even have to be about power. You can throw it into the chat. Again, if my head turns this way, it's because I'm reading my laptop, because it's easier than looking at the cell phone, but it was easier to go live on the cell phone. So talk to me, tell me how you're feeling, throw questions at me, throw statements at me, tell me I'm awesome, tell me I'm an idiot, whatever you want to do, I'm in the chat now. Okay, cool. I think I answered that question. What is the white box called with the jumper cables? I think you were talking about the charge controller, which would be the white box with the power cable. So I think I answered that question. It's basically what you have to set up between the solar panels and the battery. I was like, why can't I not remember words? I really sound like an idiot the way I stumble over my words. Okay, where are we at? Craig Browning says, going through the complicated situation of getting a Bluetti AC300 service. And like, that's sort of where I'm landing with power stations. So before people feel like this is a personal attack on Jackery, again, I think this is a power station problem. And the thing is, how much can you wait? Like, if you live in a house and you use your Jackery or Bluetti or whatever for occasional camping or occasional this and that, it's not going to kill you to go through the situation, wait, make the exchange, et cetera, et cetera. But when my generator, I started having problems with my generator. I went to a service provider, a local service provider. I got it serviced. I paid a fee for the service, and I got my gas generator back. And one of the big things all these power station companies brag about is being better than the gas generator. But the thing is, if my gas generator breaks, and I reached out to Champion. This is when I had my Champion generator before it got stolen. My Champion generator was stolen, and I had to replace it. But anyway, I contacted Champion. They're like, yeah, take it to Home Depot. They'll create a work order. They created a work order. They took care of the connection with Champion. I didn't have to mail it to Champion. They figured out what the problem was. They fixed it. And then it was a matter of them deciding if it was a warranty covered situation or a fee charge situation. And honestly, at that point, I just wanted it back, and it turned out not to cost me anything. But they figured it out. I got my unit back, and I went on my merry way, which I would have done rather it was warranty covered or not, because I just wanted my generator back. So yeah, that's sort of the complication with this, with the power station. Now, on the other end, I also don't like obvious form letters. It's sort of like when you call and you keep getting that message, and it's like, you're a valued customer for us. Please continue to hold. And you hear that music. After about 10 minutes, while you're still on hold, you're a valued customer to us. Please hold. And like a lot of these mail-in forms that you have to interact with are the same thing. You're not dealing with actual people. And sending out a form letter, I can tell is a form letter, is just as bad as that stupid voice on the phone. That's like, you're a valued customer. No, I'm not. Stop lying to me. Yeah. So Craig, I hope you get your Bluetti situation serviced. Bluetti service. And that's why I think it's important to talk about if you do get something to review for free. Almost everything will work awesome out of the box. You're going to take it out of like every single review is the same thing. I'm taking this out of the box. Ooh, look, I plugged my coffee maker in. Ooh, look what it's running for like 5 seconds. Yeah, it turned on the air conditioner, but how long was the air conditioner actually running, and how long did it take you to actually recharge the unit after you ran the air conditioner until there was no power? And so reviews of use after 3 months, 4 months, 6 months to me or a year down the line are way more important than that I opened it up and it worked review, because they all work out of the box for the most part. It's like, if I have a problem, how was it taken care of? How well was it taken care of? Did I feel a personal touch to it being taken care of? Machines are going to break. Like you can brag about which power station is better than the other, but somebody's going to get a bad one. When that bad one occurs, what is the response of the company? That's more important to me. I expect something to break. For everybody who has, a great Jackery experience, there's a small amount of people who had a bad one. For everyone who has a great Bluetti experience, there's a small amount of people who have a bad one. And that's just going to happen because machines break. It's just the way it is. And then it's about the company response to their customers having that problem. And it's just so complicated with these power stations. All right, end of rant. Thank you, Craig. I hope Bluetti sorts you out. Tina says, oh man, I have an 800 watt Bluetti. Nice, that's a good amount of power. But so far so good. I hope you have no problems. I hope it's like my Jackery 300, which is the little champ. Yay to the short kings. But yeah, I also think there's nothing wrong with starting with a power station to just get you power. Because when I lived in my car, I had I think 150 watt power station, and it was just for my laptop and to keep my phone on. I would have had no idea how to build a solar system. And what I would do is when I went to work, I would plug it into the wall, I would charge it up, and when I went back to sleep in my car at night, I'd use it for my cell phone and keep my cell phone on a lot of times. And that was a very low power draw. I didn't have a fridge in the car. So if you're just starting out and you're like, this will get me started, I think that's okay. But I also think for long-term living, there is a value in thinking, okay, but how am I going to get to the DIY system, which has parts that can be replaced or upgraded? Because the power box is also a set thing. So, you can't put a bigger inverter on it. It has the inverter it has when you bought it. You can't add additional connection options to it. It has the connection options you have when you bought it. And that may work at the earliest stages of your van life or RV life or whatever. But, as you evolve thinking, how can I start saving to get something that's a little more easier to parts out? And that's the thing. It's like you can always part it out. Even if you mess up your batteries, which is the worst thing you can do. I did it. My AGM batteries dropped too low a voltage. I got them charged back up, but they never held the charge the same way again. But when I replaced those batteries, I didn't have to replace the solar system. I didn't have to replace, the charge controller. Solar panels were fine. The charge controller was fine. The inverter was fine. I just needed to buy a new battery. Now, it was the most expensive thing that could have failed on it, but I had to buy a new battery and just hook it up to all the connections that were already there. So it was an easier fix than what you'll go through with some of these all-in-ones. Now, the other option is to have two. Because right now, my Jackery 300 is how I can turn on the lights in the box truck until I hook this up. Because I put a 12-volt plug on the end of my fuse box, and I just plug that to the Jackery, and then I can turn lights on in there and stuff when I'm working in box truck. And that's been super useful. So having the second one in the worst case scenario, if one of your power stations fails, you always have the second one that you can also use. So cycling them is also another way to take care of the problem of how long is it going to take me to resolve this with the company? Because honestly, none of them care that you're living your rig full time. None of them do. They all don't care. But anyway, all that popped off from Tina saying that she has an 800-watt power station. Where am I at? Simply C says, looking forward to your podcast. Like it best when we can see you, Mickey and Felix, but we'll be honest, I also like to listen while I work, so I'm not visually watching. That is totally cool. Olga says, hello, I'm so happy you back. Bless you always. Thank you so much. Simply C says, podcast platforms might bring a larger fan base, but I hope what you produce will also always be on YouTube too, because I don't use the other platforms. Just enjoy YouTube as a relaxing learning tool. Yeah, and I plan to have a visual version of the podcast. I noticed like other people will do that. They'll have like the audio version, but also have like a YouTube version, which is just them sitting in front of a microphone. So if you want to put it on in the background and listen to me ramble for some reason, I think that's awesome. Penn in Kentucky says, that's what was throwing me off, the clamps on the controller. Thanks. Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, like, it really doesn't matter what you connect to the thing. I'm just using the clamps because right now, while I'm just playing with it and making sure it works, and discharging it and charging it, just to make sure, everything's good, it's just an easier way to take it on and off. But eventually I will change out to standard ring connectors. Kathy Sup says, I got 3 100 amp hour lithiums installed with a multiplex inverter management thingy. That sounds cool. I don't want to know what a multiplex inverter management thingy is, but it sounds like a good thing. Kathy Sub says, best investment, lighter than the 2 AGMs. It can even run the rooftop AC. Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. Which makes me think like once I need the right size inverter. My 500-watt inverter cannot take the little air conditioning unit I have. So that's why I need to get a bigger inverter. But that can come down the line. We're going into winter now. So it's like January, I have another job coming up. And so I'll be able to upgrade a lot of things I want to upgrade on the solar system once that job starts. I don't trust like stuff happen like ever since COVID happened and took my whole job away once. And then I didn't really have like good solid paying work for like another 2 years. I'm always nervous. So like until like I'm physically there first day, I always believe the job could not happen. But hopefully in January the job happens. I'll have like decent money coming in, and I can upgrade some of the parts of the system. Especially, I want to replace the charge controller. The one I have is decent, but I still want a different one. So yeah, and I want to get a bigger inverter. So those are two things I want to change right away. But what I have will allow me to run what I need to. So Princess Pamela says, I've been keeping my eyes on battery prices. They are definitely coming down. Yes, they've come down so much. A lot of it is at this point is, do I trust the off-brand company? And I will say, with a basic battery, I have less fear than like an off-brand power station, because I don't know who Zulafan is. So if I'm going to get a power station, I'd rather do Jackery, Bluetti, EcoFlow, maybe Rock Pals. They're sort of borderline, but sort of the recognizable names. Just because there's like it's their box. If it breaks, I gotta go to them. And I don't know who Zulafan is or Ekios or whatever crazy name they have on like an off-brand power station. With the battery though, it's basically a battery. And I'm a minorly less wary about it, because it's a little more straightforward than something that has all these internal systems in it. So yeah, and like I said, after watching Will Prowse take apart a bunch of batteries, most of them seem like decent for most people's purposes. People who have very specific needs, some of the stuff he finds might be a big deal. But I hate to say I don't have Will Pro standards. I kind of don't. So, I was seeing a trend, and so I based my decisions on the trend of multiple, as opposed to a specific dialing in. But yeah. Where am I at now? Oh, thank you, Gwen. Gwen says you are awesome. Valerie Hollingsworth says, what is an inverter? What is a converter? What do they give information for? People like myself that do not know, I need power and memory. All right, so let's start with the inverter, which is the easiest thing to talk about. So your battery has, sorry, I have to get the words in my head. I know what I'm talking about, sort of, but so your battery has DC connections. So anything that's based around a DC connection, like the little plug that you have in the front of your car, is a DC connection. And so like you can plug anything that has where's the cigarette port, into your DC connection. Now, if I had this attached to this, it will allow me to turn a DC connection into an AC connection. And AC connections are basically what you have in your house. It's how you plug in things that have any sort of house power. Lights, like your lights that you hook to a light switch, you usually get a fuse box. And I'll be doing further videos once I get this all set up and installed. But if you have a fuse box, a lot of times you're going to run your DC connections to that fuse box. And so that's things like lights. I can't think of anything else. You can hook up USB ports a lot of times directly to those connections. The DC is direct current, but that will literally mean nothing to you if you understand nothing about electricity. I would say buy Will Pro's book if you're really interested in that. But a lot of small things you can hook up to your DC connections. Your AC connection, again, is the stuff you bring from your house that you want to be able to plug in. And that's why you need this inverter, because you need something that's going to convert your AC into DC, which is it's alternating current and direct current, if somebody wants to correct me. So you would not use clamps. I'm using clamps because they're removable. You would get ring connectors of some sort, and you would have to put them on the end of here. Sometimes you can buy cables already made, but once you hook this up to your battery, get it the right length, put this where you want to, you now have the ability. Oh, my bad. I should have had this off and not on. Never do that. Make sure your inverter's off before you put it on live power. Because the second I put this on here, it's live power. Now, once I have this hooked up in my rig, do I have anything I can plug in? Nothing near me. Okay, so let's pretend that this is some other device. Let's say this is my coffee maker, and I want to use my coffee maker in the morning. I'm doing a terrible job explaining this. Then my inverter is something I would turn on. There are ways, let me turn this off because it makes noise, that you can set up an inverter and then wire it to separate plugs in your rig. But that's going too far and that's advanced. You can just plug in an inverter, set it up somewhere, turn it on, and let's say this is your coffee maker and you want to make coffee. You're going to plug it into your inverter so that you can make coffee. And then you're going to make your coffee and then you're going to unplug it. Inverters pull a little bit of power on their own, even when nothing is plugged in. So ideally, if you don't have a reason to keep your inverter on all the time, it's a good idea to turn it off, just so it's not pulling power for no reason. But that's what the inverter is. The inverter is just something that's going to take your DC connection, your DC connection and turn it into an AC connection so that you can plug in like things with normal plugs that you would buy from any store. Now, every inverter has a wattage limit. So like I have a small heater over here, a small space heater. I could not plug this space heater into this inverter because it's too small. This is only a 500 watt inverter. And just so you know, anything that produces heat probably needs a lot of power. And so this small, tiny space heater requires too much power for this inverter. And you do want to make sure you size your inverter properly for whatever you have in your rig. And so that's what sometimes people don't realize. I didn't realize it either. There was things I plugged into my inverter a long time ago, and I didn't realize I never should have done that because there was not enough power in that inverter to run the device. And I thought it was the device at first. And no, it was the inverter was too small, which is something I learned along the way. A lot of stuff you kind of figure out as you go. So power is off. Let's disconnect this for now. Under normal circumstances, you would set this up permanently. You would not connect and disconnect it. So yeah, hopefully that answers what an inverter does. The charge controller is what mediates basically the power coming in from the roof and the power going into the battery. So it's monitoring how much power is in the battery. And so even if your panels are putting out like 300 watts, let's say this is almost full and it doesn't need all those 300 watts. Well, it's going to make sure it's not pumping a bunch of power into this battery that it can't take. It'll mediate down, even though so much power is coming in, this doesn't need it right now. So it'll basically slow the flow so that only enough power is going into this. It will take into account battery chemistry, which is why if you have a LifePO battery, some of the older and cheaper charge controllers don't have a setting for lithium. So it is important that the charge controller you get is compatible with lithium. And also is important that it's sized correctly for the amount of solar that you have on your roof. So yeah, and there's a bunch of websites and research you need to do. I'm not even going to go into all the math. I get confused with it sometimes and have to remind myself what I'm doing. But that's what the charge controller would do. So normally you would have another set of cables coming out of here, and they would be going up to whatever your solar source was. But this is basically the thing that's going to mediate power coming in from the solar panels and into your battery. And this needs to be between those two, or there's no regulation of that power. That is the most basic explanation of what a charge controller is that I can give. The thing about these guys up here, the Jackery, that does have a charge controller in it. Like that's what's in that box. And that's sort of the value of these and why it eliminates so many steps, because all the stuff I just showed you is in there. It has a battery in there. It has an inverter in there. That's why it has an AC connection. It has a charge controller in there. It has, these guys set up, your USB ports, like all that stuff is in there. It's not just a battery, whereas this is just a battery. So you can hook whatever you want to this. And that's why there's still value in something like this. Like I'm not devaluing power stations as an idea. I just am wary of when it's your only power source and if something goes wrong. Okay. Anyway, I can just go on, guys. Why do you let me? It's almost an hour. I didn't mean for this to be longer than an hour. So, okay. That was probably a terrible explanation of charge controllers and inverters, but I did my best without like pre-recording this and editing out where I mess up. Penn in Kentucky says, I'm looking forward to seeing how well this new setup works out. Hopefully Jackery will follow through. Can't hurt having a backup power source, exactly. Or worst comes to worst, if I'm like, you know what, I'm good, I will find a way to gift it out to somebody who needs it, which would also be fine with me, depending on how things go in the next few months. I've totally given away power stations that I got for review before because I get them for free. I don't feel right selling them. So a lot of times I'll just meet somebody and we'll be having a conversation and I happen to have it and then they're like, man, I can't wait till I can afford it, blah, blah, blah. And they're not trying to get it from me. They don't know I'm going to do it. I literally have given away a power station to a stranger that I met that day, because I was like, I have this extra one that I was just sent to review. I've done the review. I have no reason to hold on to it, and this person could need it. So we'll see what happens. It could be that situation. It could be I actually need it for backup power in some weird situation. So we'll see what happens if Jackery comes through. We'll see. Where am I? Where am I? Tina says it's going to Lola. Is that right? Lollapalooza in Tuscola. I can't pronounce any of this. I suck. Meetup. Is that I don't know. Albion State Park? Is that how you say? I have no idea how you pronounce it. 20th to the 23rd. Lost on Lanigan is doing it, and then I'm staying out that way for winter, and maybe I might get to the RTR. You have more solid plans than me. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have a loose idea of things I'd like to do. Oregon coast, visit Jaylena and Isaac. Those are my two big things once I'm wrapped up here. Gwen says, I'm thinking about getting a portable power station to power a small fridge cooler to keep my insulin safe in case of power failure. Any suggestion on size? Is it a backup or a primary, and is that all that it's going to be running? Because a 500 or a 1000 may work, or anything in that range. I think like that's a safe range. Anything smaller, I'd be worried about if you're trying to keep a fridge on 24/7. I'm assuming it's a 12-volt fridge that isn't hugely heavy on power consumption. But the thing you have to do is target the specific fridge you're getting and check its power consumption, because not all fridges are created equal. So depending on what you're using as a fridge, it's going to affect how much power you need to keep it on 24/7, and also your capacity to recharge the power station. Can you plug it in occasionally, or is that completely off the table and you're going to be dependent on solar? If so, how much solar are you going to have to replenish what you're using? Because it's two things to think about: in and out. If you're getting a bunch in, you might be able to have a smaller battery because your in is going to compensate for your out. If you can't depend on a consistent source to get power in, a larger battery that needs longer stretches between being charged back up is something that you want to think about. There isn't as much of a problem with turning a fridge on if it's a 12-volt fridge. Like most of them will turn it on, but you don't want to turn it on and then a half hour later there's no power. So it's really a matter of how much draw does the fridge you're looking at have, and what is your options for recharging your power station. If you have the option to plug it into a wall or some sort of shore power frequent enough, it may not be as bad as if you don't have that option. So those are the things you have to think about. With a lot of these questions, it's a matter of sort of what is your capacity around the question. But for me, if I'm running a fridge 24/7, I honestly wouldn't go any smaller than a 500-watt power station. And that'd be risky if I don't have a good way to recharge the power station. Jeffy's mom says, Gwen, I would get 1,000 watt if you can. I would get closer to that. That's like I said 500 to 1,000, but 500 is like if you have consistent way to get power, be that solar panels or plugging in or shore power access. 500 would be, you might have to shut the fridge off sometimes, and for insulin that might not be good. 1,000 is probably a better bet, but also you have to think about how are you going to recharge it, because that is very important. It's still, I don't care how big your battery is, it has the capacity to run out if you're pulling more power out than you're putting in. Princess Pamela says, I trust Will Krause. I do too. I'm like way behind in the chat. Probably. Jeffy's mom, thank you for the $2 super chat. Says, I still have your old solar panel. Thank you. I'm so happy it's you. Yeah, that's right. I gave you a solar panel because I was like, I don't need the solar panel anymore. I forget these things because I'm just like, if somebody needs it and I have it and I don't need it anymore, I don't feel like I need money for it. I'd rather just give it to you. I'm seeing a lot of people mention Will Prowse, and really, even his old videos are super valuable. So yes, like go through Will Prouse's archives, especially because he does a lot of advanced solar now, which might be a hard entry point for people just learning. If anybody who's like new to solar and new to Will Prouse's channel, I would say go to some of his older videos when he was living in an actual car and an RV and stuff, because there's a lot of valuable information. The basic way to set up a solar system has not changed much. There's some more new, fancy, advanced tools, but the actual basic thing you have to do to set up a solar system has not changed much. And he has some really simple, like small solar systems in his old videos. His newer videos, since he's been in the house, are a little more advanced, and that doesn't mean they're not valuable, but they're not as good of a starting point. I would also say buy his book. Will Prowse has a book called DIY Solar. I actually have a digital version on my Kindle app. So I would say buy that book. Like if you think you have the capacity to read something technical, not everybody does, and learn from it, I would say buy his book. And I would say if you're new, look at his older videos, not his newer ones, because that's when he was really doing some really basic setups that can really get you started. Miss VC says, I understand controllers and inverters better now. Thank you. I am glad my fumbling explanation was helpful. Scott Argyle says, do you ever talk to Meek, the guy who you gifted your Sienna? No, we kind of lost contact. I mean, there was no like bad blood. We just kind of lost contact. Craig Browning gave the more technical explanation of what an inverter is. Hope Springs Eternal says, hi, Dawn. Are you from the Bay Area? I am from Baltimore, but I did live in the Bay Area, one, when I started Vanlife, and two, most recently. But I'm from Baltimore. I lived in Baltimore, Maryland, either Baltimore, DC, or the surrounding counties for the first 37-ish years of my life. I think it was. Is that right? I think I can't remember how old I was when I moved to the West Coast, but I was way past my 30s, and it was the first time I'd been on a plane. Where Felicia says, love watching your builds and how you handle life changes, Dawn. Just started watching you. May have said that, but where did you get your battery from? I got my battery from Amazon. That's another hard thing when you live in a vehicle is sometimes getting larger packages. Luckily, I was here, and I am blessed to be in this particular situation because if I'd been out on the road and way away from my home address and my Jackery had like died, like that sucks. Like you don't have a lot of options because they even if they fulfill the warranty, they want a mailing address. And if your mailing address is in South Dakota and you're in California, maybe you can still do the thing, but you got to do a lot of planning to make that happen. So that can also be complicated. And that's what's nice. Like, let's say my inverter burns out or something. If my inverter burns out on my solar system, I can go to a truck stop and get another inverter. And yeah, maybe it still has a warranty and I want to follow up on that. But if I need an inverter like right that second, I can go to a truck stop and go to a Home Depot. I can go to a freaking Walmart and get an inverter for the time being and, be able to continue living. Maybe I still will go to the company and be like, can you fix this? This was under warranty. This was obviously faulty. Whatever thing you have to do, but you have a means to go somewhere and replace a part, and which gets a little more complicated with power stations, which is why it's nice to have a backup. As I mentioned earlier, my thoughts on power stations are just evolving and changing, and I don't think they're bad. I think they're awesome. They're nice little pieces of technology, but there are some things to think about if that is your exclusive power system. Yes, Tina, I am in Oregon currently. I was living in the Bay Area as my primary base for several years. I mean, I went a few places occasionally, but every time I went home, I went back to my base the past couple of years, which is in the Bay Area of California, but I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. Long answer. Dangerous to Man says, when it comes to a solar generator, get the biggest one you can afford. I don't know if that's necessarily true because not everybody has big power needs. And in my mind, I personally would get the solar generator you can afford and plan for a solar system because, like, if you really want a big beefy system to run big beefy things, I don't personally think a solar generator is the right choice. I think a solar generator, as they're called, is the right choice. A power box is, I call them solar power boxes. I know, like, solar generators, they're solar power boxes. I think a solar power box is great for one, starting out, two, small power needs. Because the big ones are just becoming more of an investment, like, reach. And honestly, for like $4,000 or $5,000, which is what they're charging for some of these bigger systems, you could probably build something better. But a 300, 400, even 500-watt box that I can take out and hook up like a projector and share a good time with my friends or take my laptop outside to work, to me, that's more worth it than a lot of these giant power boxes, a lot of the very, very big giant ones. Personal opinion. However, if you need to run a fridge specifically, because I know that's a big thing, running a fridge, get the biggest thing that's reasonable. That's my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion. Hope Springs Eternal says, I use my tiny Jackery 160 to run my Booge RV 12-volt fridge overnight. It's 40 watts and doesn't run all the time, so it's been fine. That's the thing. If it doesn't need to run all the time, there are some adaptations you can make. I personally, based on my experience, would be wary of using a 160-watt power station to run a fridge. And I really don't want to say that to people who have never done van life. because they may have unreasonable expectations of what a 106. And then also, what else do you want to run? Is it just the fridge? So if your power is just the fridge and you literally plug in nothing else, that's a different situation than I want to have a fridge running. I want to hook up an Instapot. I want to plug in my laptop. People don't realize a lot of these things start adding up. If it's a dedicated power source that all it has to do is run the fridge, it's a totally different situation than I want a fridge, an Instapot, charge my laptop. I don't know what else you could throw in there. I can't think of anything else that's in all the van videos except the Instapot. Okay, so low key, I've been wondering if I should get an Instapot because I've been doing these. I've been trying to eat better, and so I've been doing like cauliflower rice and stir fry, and usually I throw in like tofu or I make some salmon or something. And I was like, I could throw all this in an Instapot and not do as much work. But I don't want to be one of those Instapot people. It's a cult. And I low key used to make fun of those people, but I'm like, but anyway, totally off subject. Maddie, I'm totally late. I just saw you in the chat. I hope you're says my power needs stayed the same for years, but now with the e-bike and the Starlink, I've got to upsize the battery bank. And that's what happens. You can start out really simple, which is what I advise. It's what Maddie did. You can start out really simple, with what you can afford. And I don't care if that's a 300-watt power station or a 200 amp hour battery. You can start out with what you can afford and what makes sense to you. But as you start thinking, because the only way to upgrade a power station is to literally replace it. If that's going to happen in 2 months, that sucks. If it's going to happen in 3 years, I think it's a wash. So like if you invest in like a 1,500-watt power station and you use it for 3 years and you've been saving money so you can get a nice big power system, that's a good trade-off, people like argue about the 3 lifespan, which isn't true. In 3 years, it's not dead. It charges to 80%, maybe. At some point, it will reach cycles where it will only charge to 80% and not 100. You can keep charging it to 80% repeatedly. Like people get this whole cycle thing way wrong. It's going to keep running, and after years and years, it won't pull the charge the same way. And the thing is, if that's a battery, the only thing it's affecting is the battery. So you switch out the battery. If it's a power station and you reach the point of mega degradation, which literally takes years, you've lost the battery, you've lost the inverter, but maybe you got enough life out of it while you had it. And so maybe that's fine. And you just need to think about those things. I am not negative on the choice to get the power station instead of doing your own solar system. I just like to realistically approach it instead of being like super anti or pro one way or the other. If like you got through fine for 3 years, you might be like, you know what? 3 years, it did what it had to, and now I have the money to get something new or upgrade. And that just might be okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm repeating myself at this point. Princess Pamela says we instant people are not bad. Princess Pamela, do you have an Instapot? I low-key kind of want one. I'm like, I'm becoming that person. But I've just been thinking, like, everything I've been making, I either do, like, the zucchini noodles or cauliflower rice, because I'm trying to eat better. And this is an easy way to just get a bunch of vegetables. And I usually throw in, like, a bag of stir fry and add, like, a protein. And I'm like, instead of using, like, 4 pans to do this, I could put it all in the Instapot. I'm really thinking, stupidest. I'm so ashamed. Next thing I'm gonna want a Berkey. Anyway, I'm gonna one of those. Hope Springs Eternal says Jackery dedicated to the fridge. My power needs are tiny. I cook with propane, butane, or fire. Scott Argyle says, I started out with an Energy Kodiak power station, ran my winter 45 quart freezer for 4 years, upgraded this spring, bought another winter 45 cube fridge, 2 SOK 200 amp hour batteries. Sweet. That sounds like a good, exactly. So like you had your Energy Kodiak power station, you had your power station. It did the job for like 4 years. This thing right here, I've had it maybe a year. So like this didn't do its job. My Jackery 300 is still rocking. This did not do its job. And that's where it's like, no, we need to take care of this. But yeah, like you get 4 years out of a power station, and in that time, you have the money to upgrade to a nice solar system. Like I don't consider that a bad trade-off. I think that sounds awesome. Terry Newell says I've been wanting an air popper. Princess Pamela says I married my Berkey. I had to. It cost me an arm and a leg. I hope you and Berkey are enjoying a wonderful marriage. All right. I don't know how many people are still on here listening to me ramble about power. We've been on for almost or over an hour. I'm looking to see if there's any like big questions or small questions I need to reply to, but I'm probably going to be wrapping this up soon. So yeah, talk to me if there's anything you want to say in like, let's say the next 5 minutes that you want me to talk about, address, you just want to say hi, want to say like, you suck, this was a boring live, whatever you want to say. Although my moderators might knock you out if you say like anything too bad, so because they rock. Thank you to everybody who's been moderating for me. You do a great job. This one didn't seem like it had a lot of terrible things happen in it, which is good. I'm so slow getting to the chat. Sometimes like my moderators will just knock people out before I even see it. By the time I see it, I just see message deleted, and I'm like, cool, I never had to look at it. Scott Argyle says the Kodiak still rocks. Do they still make power stations? I haven't heard about Energy for a while. They used to be one of the big hitters. I actually preferred when power stations were a little more basic. Because at this point, like, everybody wants to outdo everybody else. So they're adding, like, I don't know, like Bluetooth functions and stuff, which is cool and all. But that just drives up the price. And it's like, I just need a box that has some USB ports and a plug and some 12-volt ports, and I'm good. Like, I don't care about Bluetooth and, like, all this fancy shit. Like, it's a power box. I need it. What I said a curse word. It's a power box. I need it to be a power box. And so a lot of the fancy stuff I honestly don't care about. And the more complicated they get, the more it's like the new cars versus the old cars. Again, no hate on new cars, but old cars were like super basic. A lot of the parts were basic, and now there's like so much going on with like computer systems and cars. Like the car will be trying to convince you it's about to explode, and then you go to the mechanic, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the sensor popped off for this weird thing, and now we just need to replace this thing that costs like $20, but the labor is going to cost you like $300." Like, you feel me? Power boxes are getting like that. The solar generators is like they're complicating them so much that they stop just being a box that provides power, which is the main thing you need them to do. But anyway, that's just me ranting. Earl Blackman says, did you see Chrome's new battery setup? I have not. I can say, like, I have not kept up with Chrome at all. I saw his thumbnail, so I know he got a new battery setup. Have no idea what it is. Honestly, I have no idea what it is. But I saw his thumbnail about the battery setup. Jeffy's mom wants a Berkey. Oh, shoot. Stop it. The computer's being stupid. I'm fussing at it. Mm. Felicia says, "What do you think of the Ryobi power station?" I did not know Ryobi had a power station, so I don't have. Okay, Scott Argyle says Energy still makes power stations. It's now called the Flex. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know if they were in the game, out of the game. There's so many people in the power station game now. Oh, Valerie says, I'm going to end the chat on this. Says, thank you. You're my first live chat. I'm 72. You are rocking. Been doing this since 1975 and I'm still learning. So thank you very much for your explanation on and unfortunately Valerie was cut off, but I assume explanation on the power stations. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up this chat about power stations for everybody that came, and especially for everyone who hit the thumbs up. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I'm going to try to go live once a week. I'm not going to make a promise about time because every time I do, I never actually fulfill it. So yes, I will try to go live once a week. I will also try to get out some edited videos as well. Like I said, this week my show closes, my primary show closes. Then I have 2 weeks where I'm basically just sitting on reserve. And then I'm back in the box truck full time. And so, yeah, those are the things that are happening to me. If anybody wants the full breakdown of sort of this journey, remember you can watch the replay from the beginning. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Bye bye. Have a good night.